So hello everyone again. This is lecture 4 part 2 of dual nature of radiation and matter. Let's do the further discussions on the wave nature of particle nature only. So basically in the previous lecture we understood the complete concept that how a particle can be understood as a particle nature also and dual nature also. By particle what does we try to say is anything which has a mass and it occupies space. So basically we are trying to understand the complete concept of radiation and matter as propagation in light, how it try to propagates. It try to propagates using the Descartes theory, that is wave theory also and Descartes theory also. So we are just trying to implement this. Let's go with the further discussions on this topic only. Okay. So right now we are on the 7th point, that is the particle nature of light is completed, and finally we are on the wave nature of matter and Davisson and Germer experiment. So let's start the concept here. So in the previous discussion we have completed with this concept that as the value of m increases or v increases, the value of wavelength decreases. Let us do the further discussions now. So let us see. So for example, the de Broglie wavelength of a ball of mass 0.12 kg moving with a speed of 20 meter per second. As you can see, the mass is very comparatively very small as compared to very large structures, let us say rock or let us say earth. It is very small, but it is very large as compared to electrons. So let us see for now what happens with this ball. So mass is 0.12 kg moving with a speed of 20 meter per second. 20 meter per second is also a very small, very minimal speed for a ball to move from point A to point B. So it is not a very high velocity. Let us say it is not 200 meter per second. So it is a normal. What happens is a normal velocity for a ball. So when we try to calculate the de Broglie wavelength, first of all let us calculate the value of p. What is p? P is the momentum. Momentum is nothing but the product of mass into velocity. So mass into velocity will give you 2.4 kg meter per second. Now if you try to find out the value of lambda, that is equal to h upon p. Please remember the Planck's constant, which is equal to 6.16 to 10 to the power minus 34 joule second upon p. The lambda h value is always constant, so you can just remember that because it will be asked in your exams also, and majority of the times the value of h won't be given. So lambda is equal to h upon p, which is equal to 6.63 10 to the power minus 34 joule seconds upon 2.4 kg meter per second. As you can see the value of lambda, it is of the order of 10 to the power minus 34 meters. If you remember, majority of the lambda values are in the terms of let us say nanometers or let us say mm, but going to the power of 10 to the power minus 34 meters is very small quantity, and that is the reason it is very small, it cannot be visible by a naked eye. So this wavelength is so small it is beyond any measurement. So basically this cannot be even calculated because it is very small. This is the reason why macroscopic objects in our daily life do not show any wavelength properties. So if just for an instance, as you can see that if the mass is only 0.12 kg and it is going to the order of 10 to the minus 34 meters, just imagine what will happen if we just increase the mass to let us say 1.2 kg or 12 kg or 1200 kg, then this 10 to the minus 34 will go to 37, 38 or even 40 also. Then if we cannot calculate even minus 34, so it is very almost impossible to calculate 10 to the minus 40 meters wavelength. So that is the only concept we are trying to understand in this complete wave nature of matter. So okay. So on the other hand, in the subatomic domain, the wave character of particles is significant and measurable. So what happens in subatomic domain? Subatomic domain refers to the measurement of particles, let us say like electrons, protons, photons, etc. In that case, this 10 to the minus 34 can be converted to let us say 10 to the power minus 9 or 10 to the power minus 5 or 10 to the power minus 3, etc. Okay, let us move on. So now let us try to understand this complete concept here again using for the electrons. Till now we did for the major big particles, let us say for ball, etc. Now we are trying to understand this concept for an electron. What happens for an electron? So consider an electron mass m, charge E, accelerated from rest through a potential V. Fine, okay. Only the initial parts are given here. The kinetic energy K of the electron equals the work done in electron volts. Please remember that this this EV is not the value of major work done calculated. This is basically the work done in terms of kinetic energy. So if you go and understand the concept of this in another chapter called as electric charges, then electron volts concept will also come into picture. Okay, this electron volts and EV has to be summarized in different concepts. So for now here the work done is about E into V. So basically it's E multiplied by V. Okay. So the kinetic energy K of the electron equals the work done EV on it by the electric field. Therefore K is equal to E into V. Now from the simple kinematics we already know that K is nothing but equal to half m V square, right. If I write this equation as equal to half into m into V, this mv can be written as equal to half into P into V, right. If I multiply m and divide by m, I will get half into, this will be again be P. So it is P multiplied by m, which is equal to half into P square by m, or we can write this as equal to P square by 2m. So what did we get finally? That first of all kinetic energy K is equal to E multiplied by V. This is the first thing which we got. Next thing is we also know that this is equal to half m V square, and next thing is we got is P square by 2m. Fine. Now let us say we take only the K part and let us say this part. Okay. What happens? So it is nothing but K is equal to P square upon 2m, or we can write P is equal to under root of 2m K. Fine. Also we know that K is nothing but E multiplied by V, so we can write it as 2m EV. So this is how we calculate the value of momentum for a small subatomic domain zone particles. What are the examples of small subatomic domain zone particles? Let us say electrons, protons, photons, etc. So basically what we concluded from this complete mathematical formulation is, first of all we should understand that K is equal to the work done by the particle, that is equal to E multiplied by V. Using some mathematical formulations, as we know that P is always equal to m into V, we got that kinetic energy is equal to P square by 2m, and therefore finally we got that P is nothing but equal to under root of 2m EV. Please remember this formula, this question may be asked from this relations. Okay. So the de Broglie wavelength lambda of the electron is then. So now just using this relation we know the value of P from this equation. Let us say I write this equation as equal to 1, fine. So let me write here. So we know that lambda is nothing but equal to h upon P. Just writing the value of this P here, we got this is equal to 2m EV, fine, and hence this is the relation that lambda is equal to h upon under root of 2m EV. Fine. Substituting the numerical value of h, m, e we get. So if you try to understand this, so basically when you try to put the value of h as equal to this 6.63 into 10 to the power minus 34 joule seconds, the value of e as equal to 1.6 into 10 to the power minus 19 coulombs, everything, and mass of the electron, you will get finally as this equal to lambda is equal to 1.227 upon under root of V nanometers. What is V here? V is basically the magnitude of accelerating potential. I guess it was written, yes, it was written here that it is accelerated from a rest through a potential V. Okay. So this thing has been completed, this thing has been completed, where V is the magnitude of accelerating potential in volts. Okay, fine. So for a 120 volt accelerating potential, the above equation gives lambda is equal to 0.112 nanometers. Now so this is the only mathematical part. What I was trying to make you understand is, as you can see from the relation, lambda is equal to 0.112 nanometers. This value is in order of 10 to the power minus 9 meters. In the previous case, when we are trying to understand the wavelength, de Broglie wavelength for a ball, this value came out to be in the orders of 10 to the minus 34 meters, which is very small as compared to 10 to the minus 9 meters. This value can be actually calculated. This value cannot be calculated. Cannot be calculated as in the till now, till the present era, we do not have some such substances which can calculate a wavelength of 10 to the minus 34 meters. Hence, this thing is being concluded again that finally what we know that let us say the particle be small or let us say particle be large. It comprises of the wavelength, but the point to be understood is only that a big particle has a wavelength very small which cannot be calculated. A small particle has a wavelength which can be calculated. So, we in vague terms or in layman terms, what we try to say is that a big particle does not have a wave nature and a small particle only has a wave nature. But in real case scenarios, what is actually the relation is, what is actually the concept is that both a small particle and a big particle has a nature of both discrete particle theory also and wave particle theory also, because it comprises both. So, finally, the concept to be understood to you is that it has a dual nature of radiation, dual nature of matter. That is a complete conclusion of this complete 3 slides which we understood in the part 1 and part 2. Let us move on now. So, that was a complete concept of your de Broglie relation, de Broglie wavelength. We will try to do some questions in the subsequent slides. For now, let us understand the concept of now a new concept which we will understand now about the uncertainty. What is this uncertainty? Please be very careful while listening to this, because sometimes this thing is very difficult to understand. Okay. So, this wavelength is of the same order as the spacing between the atomic planes in crystals. Quite evident. So, what does it the first line just try to say is that this can be calculated. The wavelength is of the same order as the spacing between the atomic planes in crystals. This suggests that the matter waves associated with an electron could be verified by crystal diffraction experiments analogous to X-ray diffraction. So, what does it try to say is that this values of wavelength can be calculated. This value can be calculated by either experiments or some other ways, but it can be calculated. Those wavelength of the order of 10 to the power minus 34 cannot be calculated till now. Okay. So, this suggests that matter waves associated with an electron could be verified by crystal diffraction experiments analogous to X-ray diffraction. We describe the experimental verification of the de Broglie hypothesis in the next section. So, let us see that in the next section only. In 1929, de Broglie was awarded the Nobel Prize in Physics for his discovery of the wave nature of electrons. So, it was such a big discovery that he got a Nobel Prize for it. The matter wave picture elegantly incorporated the Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. Now, let us try to understand what is this Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. Okay. According to this principle, please remember this because this can come in your exams also. What is basically Heisenberg's uncertainty principle? So, according to this principle, it is not possible to measure both the position and the momentum of an electron at the same time exactly. Again, let me try to conceptualize this concept here. Let us say this may be a little hard to digest when you try to understand this complete concept for the first time, but as your clarity, conceptual clarity increases, you can understand it at a much more depth. So, let us say I have this box. Let us say I have this box. I have a, let us say I have a slit here. I have a very powerful microscope at this location. Let us say I have a very very powerful microscope at this location, and let us say this is the particle of which I want to find out the mass. Just trying to understand it concept figuratively, what is this line trying to make you understand. Okay. Quite evident, as the electrons are being adjusted at any space, it will always have a mass, it will always have a momentum. What does it try to say is ki, let us say using this telescope we are trying to zoom at this portion and we are able to find out what is the mass of this mass of this electron or mass of this. Let us not say this as a electron, let us say this as a particle. If we can say that this mass to 100% accuracy, that this was the position, let us say this is at a location x, let us say this is y and this is z. Let us say we exactly know the location of x, y and z for this mass particle. How to calculate the momentum? For calculating the moment, so calculating the momentum, we just need the value of mass and we know the we also should know the velocity. Calculating the velocity and momentum at the same time, you are trying to make the position of the electron or the particle secure, cannot be implemented in figuratively sense. Why it can be implemented? You have to go into the very deep understanding of uncertainty principle. That much is not required as far as class 12 syllabus is considered. For now you can just understand this. I will try to make it very clear for you. So basically, if you know the position, what does it trade by position? Position is basically your x, y, z scenarios. So if you know the exact x, y, z coordinates of that the particle, at the same time at the time, let's say we understand, we do the experiment at some time t is equal to t. At the time t is equal to t, you cannot find the exact value of the momentum of that particle, and this is only the concept of Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. On the contrary, we can just say similarly, let us say we have some device for which we can find out the mass of the electron and let us say the velocity of the electron at that particular instant. If we know the value of mass of electron and velocity at a particular instant, by any means till date we cannot find out the position of that particle at that point when we calculated the value of momentum. This is the only concept which this Heisenberg's uncertainty principle is trying to incorporate. So, it just try to say that according to the principle, it is not possible to measure both the positions and momentum of an electron at the same time exactly. People may say, contradict this statement as say, let's say you have this, thing. Now you are trying to make, you are trying to find out the mass of this. You know the mass of this. At any time t is equal to t0, and at time t is equal to t, the mass of this will always be constant. Now, if I displace this, let us say I displace this from, let us say, point A to point B, you know the velocity of this by any means necessary. Let us say you use a speed gun or some any other means necessary, you can find out the velocity of this, hence you know the momentum. Now, if this is the complete space in which we are trying to make the complete experiment, we can find out the value of m also, we can find out the value of v also, and the position is also known. Then how can we cannot calculate these values for a for these particles which are being talked about here? Please remember, these are not your stationary big particles. Here radiation particles are being talked about. For the radiation particles, the complete physics is very completely different from these big particles. Big particles as in which have a very high mass, high ratio, because of conceptualizing a 10 to the power minus 19 charge and conceptualizing a mass of, let us say, 12 kgs or let us say 0.1.2 kg is very different. So, some things cannot be conceptualized much more clearly, but if you do the experiments, you can make it much more clearer. So, these experiments are already being performed by these notable scientists, and hence we know these concepts. Yes, you can say that this Heisenberg's uncertainty principle may be applicable. I am just saying may be applicable for, let us say, this big quantity, or let us say for this pen, or let us say for me, but it cannot be applicable for small particles, let us say for electrons, protons, etc. Okay. So, this was your Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. Please remember this. Let us move on. So, there is always some uncertainty delta x in the specification of position and some uncertainty delta p in the specification of momentum. Quite evident, position is denoted by delta, let us say we are denoted by delta x, and uncertainty in momentum can be denoted by delta p. Therefore, mathematically, what is Heisenberg's uncertainty principle? Mathematically, Heisenberg's uncertainty principle is the product of delta x and delta p is of the order of h bar star, with h bar is equal to h upon 2 pi, that is delta x and delta c, and as you can see, it is also not equal to, it is approximately equal to. So, even Heisenberg cannot find out exactly what is this product equal to. Means if you are writing, if this such prominent scientist is writing approximately for a concept of deviation in delta x and delta p, then it can be quite clear that the actual value of the position and the momentum of a very small particle cannot be calculated much clearly. Okay. So, delta x delta p is approximately equal to h bar, where h bar is equal to h upon 2 pi. So, please remember this formula also. This is basically your Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. Okay. Above equation allows the possibility that delta x is 0, but let us say delta x is 0 for now. Let us say delta x is 0, but then delta p must be infinite in order that the product is non-zero. Quite evident, because this value is always constant, h upon 2 pi will be always constant because h is constant. So, from this, if let us say delta x is 0, then h has to be infinite, so that, and such value such that this value is approximately equal to h upon 2 pi. What does it try to say? That if we try to decrease the uncertainty in the position, the uncertainty in the delta p value will be increases to a very much extent that we have to understand it as infinity value. What does it try to mean? What does it try to say? That if we, let us say that delta x value is approximately 0, then delta p can range from infinity to minus infinity, and that is a very high value. Okay. So, fine. Similarly, if delta p is 0, delta x must be infinite. So, this is your basically what is your Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. Let me stop it here only. I will try to make you understand now the typical parts of what is Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, and then we will go on to some of the problems for the same. So, let me stop it here only. So, thank you so much.